Have you ever seen a painting that looked extremely realistic? Jake was waiting for his mom when he saw a strangely realistic painting, but he made one mistake that would lead to terrifying consequences. During his mom's doctor's appointment, Jake was sitting alone in the hospital waiting room. That's when he saw the painting. It looked so real, almost like a photo. He was promised ice cream if he sat quietly, but he found himself growing more and more curious. He felt like he needed to move closer to the painting, so he got up and walked towards it. The painting was of an old man, but there was something wrong with it. It seemed like the eyes would follow Jake no matter where he'd walk. But soon something even more unbelievable would happen, something no one can explain. The painting, needless to say, made Jake feel creeped out, but he tried not to feel so scared. It was a painting after all. Then Jake leaned in and saw one weird detail. The old man had unusually long fingers and fingernails. A bit later, Jake's mom came out of the doctor's office, but Jake was nowhere to be found. She called him but got no reply. Then she turned around and saw a very realistic painting on the wall. The boy in the painting looked oddly familiar. This is why when something seems too good to be true, it probably is. Once a newly married couple was searching for houses they could buy, and they came across a beautiful house with a suspiciously cheap price. They couldn't see anything wrong with the house, so they just thought they got lucky. They moved in quickly. But one day the husband was walking down the hallway when he found a red crayon on the floor. He thought maybe the previous residents had left it behind, so he just threw it out. The next day he found another red crayon lying in the exact same place. This time he asked his wife about it. His wife looked shocked. She confessed that every day since they've moved in, she's been finding red crayons in the hallway too. Then the husband tried to tap on the wall at the end of the hallway and heard a hollow sound. He began peeling off the wallpaper and found a sliding door behind it. It was as if someone had tried everything they could to keep anyone from finding this door. He tried to open it, but the door was nailed shut. Then he took a hammer and pried off the nails one by one. He opened the door to find a small room with words scribbled in red crayon all over the walls. It said, "Mommy, I'm sorry, let me out," over and over. This is a scary story about the cabinet. Every family in every town in every country has one. It's a cabinet not particularly odd or out of place. The paint was peeling a bit on the corners and the knob was a bit loose. The inside smelled like dust and the paint wasn't the same as the kitchen walls. Once, a long time ago, you hid inside this cabinet during a game of hide and seek. No one told you it doesn't open back into your reality. Don't worry, you can't tell the difference. But everyone misses you. Can you imagine being locked inside your house for your whole life? Caroline's aunt and uncle said she was so ugly that she had to be hidden from the world. If anyone saw her, she'd be taken to the church and burned at the stake. But things are not as they seem. One day, Caroline started asking questions. She wanted to know why the other kids could play outside, but she could only sit and look out from her bedroom window. This made her aunt and uncle very angry. They said, "Can't you see yourself? Don't you understand the sacrifices we've had to make to keep you hidden from the world?" She had been convinced that staying trapped was for her own good, but one day she decided to escape. She used the safety pin to unlock the door and left. However, soon after she made it out, two men wearing uniforms started shouting at her. She began running. When she turned a corner, she saw a group of people who pointed at her and screamed, "Monster." Eventually, a priest came and said, "Take her to the church." They dragged Caroline to the church, put her on an altar, and set her on fire. As the fire grew, the priest turned to the crowd and said, "Look at this monster. Look at her hands, only 5 fingers. Look at her face, only 2 eyes, and her teeth a sickening white." This is why you should never take a prank too far. Once there were 2 young twins who lived in a small town and they were known for constantly misbehaving. One day a man had passed away peacefully in his home and the twins wanted to play a prank on everyone else living in the town, so they snuck into the house and started messing with the man's body. One twin moved his mouth like a puppet and the other one poked his eyes out with a stick. As they were doing this, they heard footsteps. They couldn't find anywhere to hide, so they placed the body back in the coffin, then got in the coffin themselves and closed the lid. But what they didn't know was they were taking the coffin straight to the funeral. The people carrying the coffin noted that it was much heavier than usual but brushed it off. No one even noticed that the twins were gone until the coffin was lowered. The twins' mother appeared at the cemetery about the missing twins, which stopped the funeral and began a search. Eventually, the man carrying the coffin confessed that the coffin had weighed more than it was supposed to, so they lifted it out and opened the lid. They did find the boys there, but they found them lying on top of the body, whose hands were wrapped tightly around each of their necks. The twins had been strangled to death. Can you solve this mystery? This is a story of a strange man whose house mysteriously caught on fire, but things are not as they seem. All the clues to what really happened are hidden in what I'm about to say. So this man is what we would call a hoarder, but instead of collecting things like books or clothing, he collected garbage. Eventually this bothered the neighbors, especially the terrible smell that came from the house. Then a reporter came around wanting to understand why he did it, but the man refused to speak. That night he watched the reporter talk about him on the news, saying he was a desperate man with a lot of debt who developed a strange habit after after his wife ran away. The man didn't care. He just continued to stuff his house full of garbage from the floor to the ceiling. However, one day an incident caught a lot of attention. The house mysteriously caught on fire. The man was not in the house, so he was safe, but when he returned, everything had turned to ash. Some people suspected an angry neighbor might have done it, but the man didn't seem bothered at all. Actually, it was convenient for him. He collected insurance and got himself a small apartment. He never collected garbage again. He didn't need to anymore. What really happened here?
This is why you should never get in a hot tub at night. A couple was staying at a beach resort for their honeymoon, and on the last night they decided to go to the outdoor hot tub to watch the stars. Before they went on this trip, they decided they would bring no laptops, tablets, or cameras. Only their phones for emergencies, which they also left inside their suitcases. Still, after a while, the woman found the scenery so beautiful that she said, "I wish I could get a picture of us so I can post it on Facebook." She wanted to go back inside the room to get her phone, but her husband encouraged her to just live in the moment. They stayed out there for a while until the jets went off and they went back into their rooms and just went to sleep. The next morning, the man noticed something under their door. He thought it was just a bill for their room, but it wasn't until the woman saw the look on his face that she realized something was wrong. He was holding a Polaroid picture of them from the night before. On the white part in the bottom were the words, "Here you go." It was taken from inside the room.
This is why you should never rush to conclusions. Once there was a young couple getting married. At their wedding reception, their friends decided to play a game of hide and seek with the bride and the groom. It was decided that the groom would try to find his bride and the bride would find somewhere to hide. But hours passed and the groom had searched everywhere in the venue and couldn't find where she was hiding. He assumed that she must be having second thoughts about getting married. He got mad and stormed off. Weeks went by and he accepted that she must have gone on with her life and didn't want to contact him anymore, so he did the same. A few years later, though, the cleaning lady found something horrifying. She went into the attic of the building where the reception had taken place years ago. There, she found an old trunk. She opened it and found the rotting body of the missing bride. Her face was still frozen in a scream, and inside the trunk were huge scratch marks from when she tried to get out. Can you solve this mystery? This is a story of a family that witnessed a horrible accident, but things are not as they seem, and all the clues to what really happened are hidden in what I'm about to say. So this family was taking the bus across the country to visit some relatives, but halfway through the trip, the two kids started complaining to their parents that they were hungry. The parents then requested the bus to pull over near a roadside diner and got off the bus one by one, but inside the diner, they saw something that terrified them. On the TV, they saw a news report of an accident nearby. A bus had been crushed by falling rocks and everyone on board had passed away. This was the same bus that they were just on. The wife then said, "I wish we had never gotten off that bus." The husband looked shocked. "How could you say that?" But then he thought about it for a second and said, "Oh, I see, you're right. We shouldn't have gotten off that bus." Why did they say this? Can you solve this mystery?
So I used to really like this guy who said, and I quote, "The only thing I'm into are nice bodies." And I didn't have a very nice body at the time, but I worked really hard and I got one and I went to go show it off to him. And then he started screaming and saying things like, "Get away from me, you're a murderer. How did you carry this human being all by yourself?" And as he was doing what some might call escaping, he turned to me and he said, "This is the last time you're gonna see me. What do you have to say for yourself?" And I looked at him and I said, "Do you remember that you said bodies plural?" Because I don't think you're gonna like what.
I literally want to cry. So if you didn't know, I have a sister and her name's Ashley, and we both have boyfriends. And every night we both fall asleep on the phone with our boyfriends. So one day we're all hanging out and we're like just talking, and my sister's boyfriend looks at me and he's like, "You need to stop going into your sister's room in the middle of the night." And I look at him and I'm like, "What are you talking about? I don't have a reason to go into her room. Like, I don't go into her room, especially in the middle of the night." Then my boyfriend hops in the conversation and he's like, No. He's like, "No, I hear Ashley go into Kayla's room every night and stare at her." So me and my sister both look at each other and we're like, we don't go into each other's rooms, do we? And we agreed that we do not. And they said this has been going on for months. So for months, somebody or something has been going into me and my sister's room for about 15 minutes every night and watching us sleep. But it only gets worse.
Was this a case of badly behaved children or something else? One morning, I was with my mum in the bathroom of our house while she was getting ready. She was acting a little distant, so I asked her if everything was okay, and she told me about something that had happened the night before. At about 2 a.m, she had been woken up by a strange noise, so she got up and went to see where it was coming from. It seemed to be coming from the bathroom, and as she walked in, she saw a hairdryer plugged in and turned on in the middle of the floor. She thought it was strange, but that it was probably just one of the kids, and went back to bed. About an hour later, she was woken up again by the same sound, but this time when she went to check, it was coming from downstairs. Once again, the hairdryer was in the middle of the floor, but this time in the downstairs bathroom. As she's telling me this story, I turn to look at the closet in her bathroom, and as I do, the entire light bulb smashes into pieces.
There's a creepy app called Nothing that you should never download on your phone. This is definitely one of the weirdest apps that I've ever come across. And as the name suggests, the app does absolutely nothing. When you open the app, you'll see this blank gray screen, and in the very center, there's just the word nothing written there with nothing else around it. I guess hence the name. There are no buttons, there are no menus, and there's no way to interact with the app either. And I mean, I guess the app developers achieved what they wanted because it does nothing. There was this review of someone who downloaded the app just for fun to see what it would do, but when she went to delete it afterwards, it wouldn't let her. And then slowly all the apps on her phone started disappearing until there was nothing, and she couldn't use her phone anymore. Now what's interesting is that I did a video about this app probably 2 or 3 years ago, and at the time the app did exist, but I just went onto my app store now and I don't see it anymore, so I guess.
This is why you should always sleep with your lights on. In 1991, a man named Christopher Case was found dead in his bathtub, fully clothed in the fetal position. When police interviewed his best friend Sammy, she told them about a very disturbing phone call she got from him the night before he died. On the call, he told her that the previous night he had woken up to what sounded like whispering coming from underneath his bed. When he went to look, he couldn't move. As he laid helplessly, he watched a black figure pull itself out from underneath his bed. Once it was fully upright, it reached down and began choking him until he passed out. The next morning when he came to, he felt his neck and it was swollen and bruised. And then he saw blood on his hands and he saw that there were deep, uniform incisions on each of his fingertips. As he's saying all this to Sammy and telling her how scared he is to go to bed that night, he suddenly stops and he says, "I hear whispering outside my room." Then the phone. If someone offers you this, walk away. In 2016, a man was staying at his friend's cabin in the woods when he decided to go for an evening stroll. A little ways down the trail, he hears someone call out from behind his neighbor's house. He looks up and he sees this skinny guy pop out from behind the building who starts waving frantically at him to come over. Worried this guy could be in trouble, the man takes off running to assist, but when he gets close enough, the neighbor just offers him a fistful of Slim Jims and starts talking about how much he hates his wife. Sensing there was something wrong with this guy, he says no thank you to the Slim Jims and walks away. The next day, the man calls his friend who owned the cabin to ask him what the deal was with his weirdo neighbor. There was silence on the phone, and then his friend just says, "I don't have any neighbors." The police are called, and it turns out his neighbor was really some lunatic who had recently killed his wife and had been hiding out in the abandoned cabin next door.
This is why you should never play hide and seek. A mom decided to play hide and seek with her 2 kids. The mom began counting, ready or not, here I come. She begins searching the downstairs kitchen because she knows that they hide there every single time. As she's walking to the kitchen, she starts saying, I wonder where they are. She looks under the table and sees they aren't there, which is kind of odd. She knew they were too scared to go into the basement alone, but she decided to check anyway. They weren't there either. She began to panic. The mom then says, "Jordan, Casey, come out now. Mommy's not playing anymore." There was no answer. Panic really begins to set in. She decides to call 911 and reaches an operator. She tells the operator what's wrong and the operator sends an officer to her house. Once the officer arrives, he says, "Don't worry, we will find them." As she's sitting in the living room, she hears giggling and laughing and hears a closet door slam upstairs. She sprints upstairs and says, "Jordan, Casey, you worried me sick." She opened the closet door and nobody was there. While all of this is going on, she hears the doorbell ring. She runs downstairs and finds the officer holding Jordan and Casey. The officer says they were hiding in the shed out back. Then Jordan looks at mommy and says, "Why were you telling us to stay in